There's a quiet grief that rarely gets spoken aloud, the slow death of a friendship, not the dramatic kind, with shouting or betrayal, but the gentler, quieter ending when two people who once knew each other's laughter, secrets, and dreams simply drift apart. One day you realize you haven't spoken in months, and somehow the person who once felt like home now feels like a stranger. It's a loss that feels almost invisible. There's no funeral for it, no ritual of goodbye. Yet it can ache more deeply than we admit, because friendship, unlike love or family, is a bond we choose. And when it fades, it confronts us with an unsettling truth. Even the people who once fit perfectly into our lives are not guaranteed to stay there. Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist, once observed that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But Jung also knew that transformation comes with a cost. As we evolve, so too do our inner worlds. The friendships that once reflected who we were may no longer match who we've become. Why do most friendships end? Is it time, distance, ego, or simply growth? And perhaps more importantly, what does the ending of a friendship reveal about who we are and what we seek in connection itself? Across history, philosophers have tried to define the strange alchemy of friendship. Aristotle called it one of life's highest goods, a relationship based on virtue, where each friend helps the other to become more fully themselves. But modern psychology paints a more complex picture. We outgrow friends not out of cruelty, but necessity. The self is not static, and so our relationships, like mirrors, must shift as the image inside them changes. In this exploration, we'll dive into the 6 hidden truths Jung and the thinkers who came before and after him help us uncover about why friendships fade and how to face their endings with understanding rather than resentment. Because maybe, just maybe, the end of a friendship isn't set a failure, but a quiet invitation to evolve. There's a strange melancholy in realizing that someone you once shared everything with, your laughter, your plans, your most vulnerable truths, now feels like a faint echo from another lifetime. You scroll through old messages or photos, and it feels like looking at a version of yourself that doesn't quite exist anymore. It's tempting to call it drifting apart, as though some invisible tide has pulled you in different directions. But Carl Jung would say it's something deeper, something psychological, even spiritual. He believed that every human life moves along the path of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are beneath the layers of expectation, imitation, and social masks. In Jung's view, relationships form around shared stages of development. When two people meet, it's not just personalities colliding, it's two psyches aligning at a certain level of consciousness. And as one begins to change, the structure that once held the friendship together can quietly dissolve. This is why growth, though beautiful, can be lonely, because every act of inner expansion, learning, healing, becoming more self-aware, subtly rearranges the emotional architecture of our lives. You might begin to notice different things, seek different kinds of conversations, feel drawn to new experiences. And when that happens, the people who once felt like home may not understand you anymore, not because they've changed, but because you have. Philosophers have long wrestled with this tension between loyalty and becoming. Aristotle described friendship as a mirror of virtue. We love another person, he said, because through them we see our own potential for goodness. But what happens when our definition of virtue changes? When what once felt noble or inspiring now feels hollow or limiting? Nietzsche took it further. The friend, he wrote, should be a master in guessing and keeping silent. True friendship, for him, demanded a kind of creative distance, an understanding that growth sometimes requires solitude, and that a real friend would not interfere with that process. But most friendships are not built to withstand silence. We crave validation. We want the other person to recognize our transformation, to celebrate it. And when they don't, when they seem unmoved or even resistant, we interpret it as rejection. Yet perhaps they're simply still standing in the place where you left them, waiting for the person you used to be to return. The truth is, every friendship carries within it a quiet expiration date, not predetermined, but dependent on whether both people continue to evolve in compatible directions. Sometimes they do, and the friendship deepens into something timeless, but more often, one grows faster or differently, and the once perfect balance between two souls begins to tilt. And it hurts, because growth at its core is a form of leaving behind versions of ourselves we've outgrown and the people who once mirrored those versions back to us. Jung would remind us that this is not betrayal. It's the natural consequence of individuation. The self that is becoming more whole must shed what no longer fits. Friendships fade, not because love dies, but because life moves. Still, there's a profound beauty in recognizing this without resentment. To look back on an old friend and think, we walked together for as long as our paths allowed, that is not loss, it's grace. So before you mourn the friendship that faded, ask yourself, was it meant to last forever, or only until you learned what you needed from each other? Growth creates distance. Yes, but that distance also creates perspective, the space to see how far you've come. Every friendship begins with an illusion, not a malicious one, but a necessary one. We don't see people as they truly are. We see them as we need them to be. When you first connect with someone, it often feels magnetic, effortless, almost fated. You think, finally, someone who understands me. You feel mirrored, seen, affirmed in ways you didn't know you longed for. But as Carl Jung taught, this sense of recognition often isn't recognition at all. It's projection. Jung called this the shadow, the hidden aspects of ourselves that we repress or deny, the parts of us we deem unworthy, shameful, or too difficult to face. Yet these buried qualities don't disappear. They seek expression, and one of their favorite stages is our relationships. When we admire someone's confidence, it may be because we've buried our own boldness. When we resent someone's neediness, it may be because we fear our own dependence. When we feel drawn to someone's darkness, it may be because it resonates with our own unacknowledged pain. In this way, friendships become mirrors of the soul, not always flattering ones, but deeply revealing. At first, these projections create intimacy. They help us connect to form stories about who we are through the reflection of another. But over time, the illusion cracks. You begin to see the other person not as the ideal you constructed, but as they truly are, flawed, complex, contradictory. And this is where most friendships begin to fracture, because the moment our projection breaks, we often feel betrayed, as though the other person changed, when in truth, it was our perception that matured. Jung warned that if we fail to recognize our projections, relationships become battlegrounds for our unconscious conflicts. We start fighting not with the person before us, but with the parts of ourselves we've projected onto them. This is why small disagreements in friendships can feel strangely disproportionate. It's not just about what was said, it's about what it symbolized. Your friend cancels plans, and suddenly you feel invisible, rejected, unimportant. But beneath that reaction may lie an old wound, a childhood echo, being unconsciously reawakened. The philosopher Martin Buber wrote that true relationship begins when we move from the I-it to the I-thou, when we stop relating to others as objects in our personal story and begin meeting them as living, evolving beings in their own right. But to do that, we must reclaim our shadow, the parts of ourselves we've placed in them. So ask yourself, what is it that I've been asking my friends to carry for me? What part of me do I love only when I see it reflected in them? When a friendship ends, we often blame the other person, their flaws, their distance, their failure to understand. But endings are also mirrors. They show us the limits of our own self-knowledge. If we look closely, we might find that the qualities we most condemned in the other are precisely those we most fear in ourselves. This is why some friendships are both magnetic and volatile. The attraction comes from deep psychological resonance, but so does the conflict. You are not only drawn to their light, but also to the shadow that matches yours. Understanding this doesn't necessarily save a friendship, but it can save your peace. It allows you to release others from the impossible task of holding your unconscious for you. To see a friend clearly, not as an ideal, not as an enemy, but as a mirror, is one of the most mature acts of love we can perform. Because only when we stop projecting our shadows onto others can we begin to see them and ourselves with true compassion. If this reflection resonates with you, if you've ever watched a friendship change and wondered what it revealed about you, consider subscribing. We explore these hidden dimensions of the human heart every week together. We often speak of loyalty as the highest virtue in friendship. Real friends never leave. True friendship lasts forever. These phrases sound noble, but they also hide a quiet illusion, the idea that people should remain who they were when we first loved them. The human ego, Jung observed, is not evil, it's simply afraid of uncertainty, afraid of loss, afraid that change will render us unrecognizable to those who once understood us. So it builds attachments, fixed images of how things should be. And when reality moves beyond those images, we call it betrayal. But what if the betrayal isn't set in the other person changing? The bendness in our refusal to let them. Nietzsche once wrote, "The friend should be the companion of your heart, not the guardian of your past." Yet most of us unconsciously make our friends into monuments of memory, custodians of who we used to be. When they grow in ways we don't understand, or we ourselves begin to evolve beyond shared patterns, the ego interprets it as disloyalty. You may have felt this: a friend who no longer shares your interests, who stops confiding in you, or who seems to outgrow the bond that once defined you both. Part of you feels abandoned. Another part, quieter, wiser, senses that nothing wrong has happened. Life is simply moving forward. The Stoics would call this amor fati, the love of fate, the acceptance that what unfolds is neither good nor bad, but necessary. Epictetus reminded us that when you kiss your child, remember that you kiss a mortal. The same could be said of friendships. Every moment we share with someone exists under the shadow of impermanence. But the ego resists this truth. It insists on permanence. It wants loyalty, not as a living bond, but as a contract frozen in time. This is why so many friendships crumble, not through conflict, but through unmet expectations. The friend who fails to check in, the one who drifts away, they violate our internal script of what friendship should look like. We rarely pause to ask, did they owe me that? Or have I mistaken emotional familiarity for obligation? Jung believed that true connection requires the death of illusion. Until we let go of our fantasy of what the other should be, we cannot truly meet them as they are. Imagine for a moment two people standing side by side, hands clasped. Between them stands not love, but an invisible contract, an unspoken expectation. You must never change without me. You must never grow beyond this version of us. That feels comforting at first, but eventually suffocates both. Real loyalty is not about sameness. It's about allowing space for evolution. To say to a friend, even if you change, even if you walk another path, I will not demand that you remain small for my comfort. This kind of love requires ego death, the willingness to let parts of our identity dissolve when they no longer serve truth. It means releasing the pride that says, if they really cared, they'd still be here. Sometimes they still care deeply, just from a different horizon. Khalil Gibran, in The Prophet, wrote, "Let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you." That's not detachment. It's maturity. It's understanding that real loyalty isn't possession. It's presence, even across distance. So perhaps the next time you feel the sting of a friendship fading, you might ask, is this loss or liberation from illusion? Because when we free our friends from the obligation to stay the same, we also free ourselves from the fear that love must always mean holding on. Stand still for a moment and imagine your life as a vast landscape. There are fields you've already walked through, lush and full of familiar flowers. There are paths ahead you haven't yet discovered. And if you look closely, you'll notice that the terrain itself changes with the seasons: spring's awakenings, summer's bloom, autumn's release, winter's stillness. Carl Jung believed the human psyche follows a similar rhythm, cycles of expansion and contraction, creation and withdrawal, connection and solitude. He called these movements the process of individuation, the ongoing evolution of the self toward wholeness. But what most people don't realize is that friendships live within those cycles too. There are spring friendships, born in the freshness of discovery, when two people find resonance in each other's ideas and energies. Everything feels effortless. You can talk for hours. These friendships are driven by possibility. Then come the summers, times of shared growth, adventure, and joy. The friendship matures, roots deepen, you begin to believe it will last forever. But eventually, every friendship encounters autumn, a subtle cooling. Interests diverge. Priorities shift. One of you may be entering a new phase, a career change, a relationship, a spiritual awakening, while the other remains in a different rhythm. There's no betrayal, no fight, just a quiet mismatch of seasons. And finally, there is winter, the silence. Communication slows, the friendship sleeps, or perhaps ends. You tell yourself you'll reconnect when things settle, but life in its relentless motion rarely pauses long enough for that. It can feel heartbreaking, but if we listen closely, winter is not just the death of connection, it's the soil preparing for renewal. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, once wrote, "What happens to every seed happens to man and his friends, dissolution, transformation, and return." The Stoics saw change, not as loss, but as the heartbeat of the universe. To resist it is to suffer. To accept it is to find peace. When we cling to friendships past their natural season, we create inner tension. We replay memories, question our worth, or idealize what once was. But life is seasonal precisely so that growth can continue. Spring cannot arrive if autumn refuses to let go. There are friendships meant for a phase, not a lifetime, and that doesn't make them any less real. Some people appear just long enough to awaken a part of you. They accompany you through a particular lesson, and then their role in your story ends. Jung might say that their presence served the psyche's deeper purpose to help you integrate something essential before moving on. And sometimes the cycle turns again. Friends who drifted in one season return in another, renewed, transformed. You meet as different people, yet somehow still connected by the invisible thread of shared history. The Taoist sages described this as Wu Wei, effortless alignment with the flow of nature. When we stop forcing things to remain as they were, harmony restores itself. Some connections must fade so that others, or perhaps solitude itself, can nourish us anew. So if you find yourself mourning a friendship that seems to have ended, ask, is it truly gone or simply sleeping beneath the snow? To live wisely is to stop demanding endless summers, to see beauty in the leaves that fall, to thank those who walked beside us, not for how long they stayed, but for how deeply they shaped our path while they were here. Every soul has seasons, every friendship too. And when we accept this truth, we no longer fear endings. We simply learn how to move with them. Most of us are never taught how to end a friendship. We know how to start one, how to bond over shared laughter, how to open our hearts. We even know, in a way, how to endure romantic heartbreak. But the ending of a friendship, that is a quieter grief, one the world doesn't quite know how to honor. So we tend to avoid it. We ghost each other. We let messages go unanswered. We pretend we're just busy. Yet beneath that silence often lies something sacred. The final lesson of connection, learning to let go without resentment. Carl Jung said that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off what's painful, but by integrating it, by facing life's necessary sorrows with consciousness. To end a friendship well is to face one of the most human sorrows there is, the recognition that even love can have limits. Philosophers have wrestled with this since the dawn of reflection. Socrates taught that wisdom begins in self-knowledge. To know when a friendship has reached its natural conclusion, and to accept that with clarity is a form of moral intelligence. It requires both courage and compassion. Ending well does not mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It means acknowledging that pain without assigning blame, saying in essence, I am grateful for who we were. I no longer resist that our paths have diverged. May your journey continue with peace. This kind of farewell is rare, not because people don't care, but because our egos confuse ending with failure. We think if the friendship mattered, it would have lasted. But that's like saying every flower that dies was never beautiful. There is wisdom in the art of closure, a gentle conversation, a note of gratitude, or even, when words are impossible, a silent inner blessing. These small acts restore integrity to what might otherwise decay into bitterness. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once wrote that we should depart from each encounter as if it might be the last, for one day it will be. This isn't cynicism, it's reverence. When we see impermanence clearly, we treat every moment and every goodbye as something holy. To end well is to leave space for peace instead of resentment. It allows both people to carry the memory with lightness, not with the weight of unfinished emotion. It also prevents the slow corrosion that comes from avoidance, the stories we invent about why someone left, the quiet judgments we hold in place of understanding. Sometimes, ending well simply means not forcing continuity. Friendship doesn't have to be resurrected to be honored. It can rest like a well-lived chapter, complete in its own time. There's a passage from Jung's The Red Book that captures this beautifully. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Yet one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To consciously close a friendship is to walk into that darkness, to face loss without denial, to hold gratitude and grief at once. So perhaps the real test of friendship is not how long it lasts, but how well it ends. Can we say goodbye without turning love into resentment? Can we release someone without needing to be the hero or the victim? There is grace in closure, dignity in truth, and peace, deep, quiet peace, in accepting that some endings are not tragedies, but acts of integrity, because the way we end things shapes the kind of person we become. And when we end well, we carry forward something essential, not the friendship itself, but the wisdom it gave us. After a friendship ends, the silence can feel vast. You reach for your phone out of habit, remember there's no one to text, and your hand hesitates midair. The days feel a little emptier, not catastrophic, just quieter. And in that quiet, an unsettling truth begins to surface. The space they once filled is now yours to inhabit. Carl Jung believed that every loss, every separation, is an invitation to encounter the self, the deeper, unfragmented core beneath all the roles and attachments. He called this process individuation, the lifelong journey towards psychological and spiritual wholeness. In friendship, as in love, we often outsource parts of ourselves. We rely on another person to hold certain qualities for us: courage, humor, sensitivity, hope. We feel whole through the combination of two selves. But when that connection dissolves, those qualities don't vanish. They simply return home, waiting to be reclaimed. So the emptiness you feel after a friendship fades is not just loneliness. It's the psychic echo of energy returning to you, a call to become what you once sought in another. Jung wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The transformation doesn't stop when the friendship ends. It continues invisibly within you. The traits you admired in your friend, their confidence, their empathy, their clarity, those were not borrowed. They were awakened. Becoming whole again means taking back what the friendship mirrored. It means learning to carry your own depth rather than depending on someone else to reflect it." But there's another dimension to this wholeness: solitude. In our culture, solitude is often mistaken for deficiency, as if being alone means being incomplete. Yet philosophers from the Stoics to the mystics saw solitude as sacred ground, the place where integration occurs. Kierkegaard called it the school of selfhood. Nietzsche called it the path of the strong spirit. Jung saw it as the necessary chamber of transformation, the crucible in which the fragments of our psyche melt into unity. When you no longer fill the silence with distraction, you begin to hear the faint voice of your own soul. You notice patterns, not just in others, but in yourself. The friendships that ended weren't random. They were chapters in your individuation story. Each one brought a lesson: how to love, how to listen, how to assert, how to let go. And slowly you begin to sense something profound. The people you've lost haven't vanished. They live within you as archetypes, as energies, as quiet presences shaping who you continue to become. Jung once said, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." To become whole again is to accept that friendships, like all relationships, are temporary expressions of something eternal, the human longing for unity. When one ends, it doesn't mean connection has failed. It means life is inviting you to deepen your connection inward, where it can never be taken away. You start to forgive, not just them, but yourself, for the things left unsaid, for the moments you didn't understand each other, for the slow human drift that neither of you knew how to prevent. And in that forgiveness, a new peace emerges, not the comfort of having them back, but the serenity of realizing you don't need to. The goal of individuation is not isolation, it's integration, the ability to stand whole within yourself, yet open to others, to love deeply without clinging, to let go without losing yourself, to walk alone without being lonely. So when a friendship ends, and you find yourself in that vast silence, remember this is not emptiness, it's the space of becoming. And from that space, every new connection, including the one you form with yourself, will be truer, freer, and infinitely more alive. So, why do most friendships end? Not because we fail at love, not because people are careless or cruel, but because friendship, like every living thing, is subject to time, and time asks all things to change. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He saw relationships as mirrors for the psyche's evolution, as living symbols of our inner journey. Every friend we love and every friend we lose is a reflection of who we are at that particular moment in our becoming. When we ask why friendships end, what we're really asking is, why can't everything stay the same? And the answer, whispered quietly through every ending, is this: because you are not meant to stay the same. Let's look back, not with analysis, but with understanding, at what we've uncovered together. Insight 1: growth creates distance. You learn that change, though often painful, is not betrayal. Every step forward reshapes the bonds that once defined us. Friendships fade, not because they were false, but because you and they grew in different directions. Insight 2: the shadow between friends. You discovered that the people we love are mirrors of our own unconscious, reflecting both our light and our darkness. Every attraction and every disappointment carries a message about the parts of ourselves we've yet to claim. Insight 3: ego, expectation, and the illusion of loyalty. You saw how the ego demands permanence, while life demands movement. The truest loyalty is not about holding on, but about allowing others to evolve freely, even when that evolution takes them away from us. Insight 4: seasons of the soul. You came to understand that friendships, like nature, have rhythms, moments of bloom, decay, and renewal. When we align ourselves with those rhythms, we stop fearing endings and start honoring their necessity. Insight 5. The gift of ending well. You recognize that closure, handled with honesty and grace, is a moral act. Ending well allows us to preserve the beauty of what was rather than poisoning it with resentment. Insight 6. Becoming whole again. And finally, you found that solitude after loss isn't emptiness, it's transformation. When we stop seeking completion in others, we begin to discover the deeper wholeness that was ours all along. Taken together, these truths don't make loss painless, they make it sacred. Because every friendship that ends leaves behind something indestructible: the growth it inspired, the reflection it offered, the love that even in memory continues to shape who we are. You begin to see that the end of a friendship is not a door closing, it's a threshold, a passage from dependence to self-realization, from nostalgia to wisdom, from needing others to mirror you, to seeing yourself clearly enough that you can love without illusion. And when you reach that place, something extraordinary happens. You stop measuring friendships by how long they last. You begin to cherish them for how deeply they change you. You no longer demand forever. You practice presence. You love fully, without holding back, knowing that nothing in this world belongs to you, yet everything can touch you. Maybe that is what Jung meant when he said that the soul is not meant to be understood, but to be lived. The friendships that come and go are part of that living, expressions of the psyche's search for itself through others. So if someone once dear to you has drifted away, if there are names that still echo in your mind but no longer in your phone, take a breath. Do not harden your heart. Do not tell yourself it was meaningless. It meant exactly what it needed to mean. It was life moving through you in the form of another person. And perhaps the most mature kind of love is this: to thank them silently for the season they shared, to release them without bitterness, and to continue becoming, not smaller from loss, but larger from understanding. Because in the end, friendships don't really end. They transform into memory, into insight, into parts of yourself you wouldn't have known without them. And maybe that's all life has ever been asking of you: to keep meeting, growing, parting, and meeting again, with an open heart, a curious mind, and the quiet courage to love things that don't last. If this reflection spoke to something in you, if it helped you see an ending not as failure, but as transformation, I invite you to stay on this journey with us. Subscribe, share your thoughts below, and tell me what has a friendship taught you about who you are. Because every story, every reflection adds light to this quiet, growing conversation about the human soul.